I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zender, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
The candidates in next week's special election in Minnesota's Senate District 11 are live in the studio tonight.
We will hear from Republican Jason Rarick, Legal Marijuana Now candidate John Birrenback, and Democrat Lourey.
And we'll have the week's top business stories from Business North.
The Senate District 11 debate next, right now on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching tonight. And Julie, there has been very little time for voters to get to know the candidates in the special election in Minnesota Senate District District 11.
That's true. It's been a very compressed schedule, so we're excited to have everyone here in the studio with us tonight.
Absolutely. And we also want to welcome everyone watching live on our Facebook feed tonight. Julie?
All right. Thanks, Denny, and welcome everyone. When Governor Tim Walz picked Tony Lourey as the new commissioner of the Department of Human Services, it created a vacancy in the state Senate in District 11. 3 candidates will be on the ballot next Tuesday for a special election in that district, and they are all here this evening. Representative Jason Rarick is running for the seat. He is a Republican currently representing House District 11B. John Sparky Birrenback is running for the seat as the Legal Marijuana Now party candidate. And Lourey is the Democrat running to replace his father in the Senate 11 seat. And thanks to all of you for being here. I understand it's the first time you've all been in the same room debating this time around. So we're honored to be hosting it tonight. And we'll start with the most basic question. Representative Rarick, why would you be the best person for the job to represent the citizens?
I believe that with my experience as a construction worker, a small business owner, having coached my son in sports and taught religious ed classes, and then my experience in the legislature, that I'm the most prepared to hit the ground running right in the middle of session.
Mm-hmm. John, how about you?
Well, as a small business owner and consider myself kind of a lifelong resident of the district. My grandfather's cabin I've been going to ever since I was a child, that I feel that I'm going to be people that can come to me and I can look at both sides of the issue. I'm not stuck to the political parties.
Mm-hmm. And Stu?
Yeah, I'm running for state senate to represent my community, my home, communities that I love, and people that I deeply believe in. And I think we've been out knocking on doors. We were out this Saturday. We knocked on 800 doors and talking to folks about the issues that matter, top of mind for folks: healthcare, fair funding for our public schools, and making sure that we got good jobs and housing so everyone can build a life here. And I think they're looking for someone who will be a strong voice and deliver on a bold vision on those issues. And so making that case to folks over the next 4 days.
All right.
All right, since we have a Legal Marijuana Now party candidate, John, with us tonight, let's get to that issue right away. Why or why not should we legalize marijuana? John?
Well, quite frankly, we should legalize it because it's one of the safest substances on the face of the planet. Aspirin. More people die from aspirin overdose than have ever died from marijuana overdose. In the states that have legalized it, they've seen a 30% reduction in opioid overdose. The medical marijuana program here in the state of Minnesota, quite frankly, is a failure. Such a limited supply, long distances that need to be traveled. It's just simply ridiculous. Not on top of that, we've got billions of tax dollars that are available, ready to be collected. The state would spend money to lock up nonviolent marijuana criminals than to legalize it, tax it, and regulate it and make it safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Stu, what's your take on this issue?
Look, I think this is where the conversation is headed. We've seen it across the country, and we've seen bills be introduced in the legislature in Minnesota. I think looking at those proposals, I think we need to ask some key questions, right? We need to look at the public safety perspective, and I'm looking forward to talking with folks in that arena in the district. We need to look at a public health perspective and making sure that we're making sure people's are safe there. And we need to look at it from an economic perspective and make sure that any wealth or taxes that generated from this industry stay here in Minnesota, and important for us stay right here in this region.
And Jason, what is your take?
You know, I think eventually we're going to get there. I don't know that Minnesota's ready right now. I would like to see us follow along what's happening, say, in Colorado and some of the other states. I was out in Denver this summer for a conference and spoke to a few people, and there's some growing pains happening in Colorado, and so I guess I would just as soon watch what happens, see how they deal with it, and then in the future to take a look at it.
With all due respect to the representative here, you know, they've been doing this in Colorado. They've done this in a variety of other states. They've seen the impact on it. The impact has been purely positive across the board. There's a lot of money to be made in it, not only for the taxes that could be generated for it, but we're talking about a crop that is really misunderstood. Everybody thinks of marijuana as a plant that gets you high. They forget about the fact that it can be used to make the fiber that your clothing is made out of. They can use it to make paper. They can use it to make fuel. They can use it to make food. Back in the 30s, they did a study that found that 1 acre of hemp would equal 4 acres of trees in the production of non-toxic paper. So back in the 30s, they didn't have nearly the kind of production that they're seeing in other countries where they're growing this crop for commercial use. So this is an extremely valuable crop on a whole variety of different levels and could really bring an added rural development by bringing in the businesses that are going to need to process this crop in order to make the money for the farmers.
Well, 3 years ago, we legalized industrial hemp in Minnesota. We just haven't seen companies take that over. I agree, and I supported that 100%. But people I spoke to in Colorado said they're having some issues, and the statistics I've seen is it's costing the state $4 to $6 for every dollar that's coming in right now, mainly through their HHS department. So, so those are things I want to look at before.
Yeah.
Lourey, you want to jump into the conversation?
And some of those are some pretty biased studies. The studies that are being done by the state-sponsored organizations and stuff like that are coming up with the exact opposite conclusion. This is medical marijuana in Minnesota. I'm allowed legally to hold this because I'm a caregiver for a person who's allowed to get marijuana in Minnesota for a medical purpose. In order for her to be able to get her marijuana, I need to travel either an hour one direction in order to be able to pick it up, or she needs to be able to travel an hour one direction in order to get it picked up. Minnesota controls medicine in the state of Minnesota. There's no reason why this shouldn't be more widely available so that more people can use it. The system that we have in place is broken. It needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to jump in?
I mean, I think I agree. We need to look at other states that have done this and take best practices and make sure that we're keeping wealth here and keeping it in our rural communities. And I agree that we need to get more industrial hemp and promote that and make sure that that wealth comes in terms of economic development in our communities.
Mm-hmm. Let's move away from marijuana for a while, because I imagine you're not a one-issue candidate.
No, absolutely not.
Let's move into healthcare, because that has been a big issue, not just in Minnesota, but across the state, but across the country. What would be your plan, Lourey, to kind of help bring healthcare costs into line?
Yeah, this is the number one issue I hear about on the doors. You know, I was talking to someone, I was at a senior lunch in Pine City talking to folks, talking to someone, he's a diabetic. His medicine costs $900 for basically what turns out to be a 2-week supply about when he uses it, if he has already reached his out-of-pocket max. So it's just reaching a point where it's unsustainable for folks. And I think there's some key questions that are facing this next legislative session that can help us move toward a reality where truly no one has to choose between care that they need or prescription drugs that they need to survive and putting food on the table or paying their rent, right? So I think one thing that I'd be eager to take action on is expanding the Minnesota Care program through a buy-in option. I think if that were done right, it would provide meaningful options for families, bring down prices on the individual market, and give folks a low-cost option that could help them get high-quality care. You know, the other thing that I think we need to look at, and this is really about tackling healthcare costs overall, but I think the low-hanging fruit there is the high cost of prescription drugs. We've seen that skyrocket, and I think there are some common sense proposals. Take on big pharmaceutical companies and use our buying power through the Medicaid program in the state and other options to help bring down those prices for families.
Mm-hmm. Jason Rarick?
You know, I believe the government has a role, that more of oversight and making sure that companies are treating people fairly. I don't agree that we should expand Minnesota Care. We have a great program right now with that people can use, who really need it, and it's fully funded right now through for what it needs. If we expand that and allow people in who can afford their insurance coverage in other ways, we're going to bankrupt that program. So I would like to see us expand co-ops like we did for farmers, and allow people to get into groups. If they're not in a large company where they're already a part of a group, they can go into these co-ops, be part of a group that way, or let these religious organizations have their programs that they've started up that have been very successful for them.
I'd like to say,
Let's give him, Mr.
just for a
Birrenback,
second here, if I can jump in.
opportunity.
I was in the military. I was a Navy medic. I worked with the Marines. We had a single system for health care. If you were sick, you came in, you got treated, you got taken care of. It was provided by the military. There's no reason why we can't move to a single payer system and eliminate the CEO's salaries and the bonuses and things like that the drug companies and the insurance companies are raping the people of Minnesota and the United States. I watched my health care coverage go from being something that I could reasonably afford to something I frankly can't afford at all anymore. And it's for coverage that's basically catastrophic care. If I have a heart attack or something, then they'll help me. But for the minor little visits that I need to go to the doctor because I might have a sore throat or I might have the flu or something like that, I've got to pay that all out of pocket. And it simply is wrong that the state of Minnesota, which has some of the finest health care in the country, can't supply its citizens with what I consider to be a basic human right, which is the right to health care. You should be able to go into a clinic and be able to be seen without having to go through a bunch of red tape.
So I wanted to just jump in on the Minnesota Care point, because I think it's something that folks misunderstand sometimes. So the proposal of it is a buy-in. So the premiums that people would pay for that expansion. So the idea that it would somehow bankrupt a program which is bipartisan, been around since '96, provides quality coverage to 100,000 Minnesotans is unfounded, right? What it would do, it would expand a high-quality benefit set with the kind of benefits that aren't just catastrophic coverage, like what we've seen with the junk plans that are proliferating across the country and folks have tried to allow here in Minnesota. This is high-quality coverage that actually gets people care that they need at a low cost, and I think that's what people are looking for.
I think the other issue, though, that wasn't brought up is the reimbursement rate to the clinics and the hospitals through Minnesota Care is a lot of times below their actual cost. And if we do this, we're going to see our small town clinics and hospitals close, and we'll have to drive into the metro areas to get the care we need. And I think that's just opposite.
And unfortunately, that's the result of what's currently going on, is that these clinics are having these problems running because of the system that's currently in place and all the waste and abuse and fraud that's frankly taking place in the system. So if we can eliminate all of that, we can pay for this universal health care through tax dollars that are offset by the amount of money that people are paying for their premiums right now. If they're paying for their premiums, they can easily have that money shifted to a tax base where it then goes to pay for everybody's premiums, and everybody gets covered with the health care.
So I think the other important thing for rural clinics and clinics in small towns, when people don't have insurance and they come and present in an emergency room, right, they have to be given that care, and the hospitals have to eat that cost, right? So if we make sure that people have coverage and quality coverage, then hospitals get reimbursed. They can afford to hire staff and bring them into our communities and help build folks up. So I think reimbursement is something that we need to look at, but making sure that people have coverage, I think bottom line is the most important thing.
And
that's what families need.
I'd like to move on to another subject.
Reimbursement is really a big thing for people because the doctors have figured that out. The hospitals have figured it out. We're only going to get a certain amount of money for Medicare patients, so we're going to increase the costs for everybody else so that when Medicare and Medicaid actually pay the bill, they get what it is that they need in order to pay the costs.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now on to go to another subject. Jason, let's start with you. Do you favor an increase in the state gasoline tax for roads and bridges?
I would prefer that we dedicate sales taxes and lease taxes, but I'm willing to consider one if we do it jointly with some of the dedication. You know, I know we've kind of been beating our heads against the wall for the last 3 years with the Republicans backing the sales tax dedication and the Democrats wanting to do the gas tax. So I say either we come together and each take about half of our plan, or we scrap both and come up with something new.
Do you see it happening this year?
I believe there's potential, yeah. I think we all know it needs to be done. We need $6 billion over a 10-year period to just fix our roads, so we all know it needs to be done.
All right, John, your take, please.
Yeah, I'm in definite favor of having the gas tax and licensed vehicle fees and all that stuff be dedicated toward building roads, bridges, all of those kind of things, because that's the money that is being brought in from those things, much like the DNR gets its money from a lot of licenses for fishing and hunting and stuff like that. The Department of Transportation should be getting all of the money that's coming in from all of those various tax means. No, I'm not in favor of an additional tax on gasoline. We finally started to see the prices of gas come down. Down in Pine City, we're looking at $1.94 a gallon for gas. I haven't seen $1.94 a gallon for gas since the mid-1980s. I notice up here it's a little bit higher, and I kind of wonder why there's such a disparity going on. But adding an additional tax onto people who is primarily going to hurt the working and middle class just doesn't seem fair to me.
All right. Stu?
We absolutely need to invest in our transportation infrastructure. You know, I'm from a rural community. This district represents many rural communities and small towns, and we use our infrastructure, right? People commute 30, 60 miles to work, and we all know I drove up here on Highway 23, and these rough winters, our roads take a beating. You know, you can feel every crack. And so we need a stable, fair, and reliable source of funding to make up for that infrastructure backlog, and willing to look at all options, and as long as it's fair and stable.
Mm-hmm. While we're on the topic of infrastructure, Greater Minnesota is still struggling to have access across the board to high-speed broadband. John, what do you think the state should do, and what would you want to do as a lawmaker to help make sure that that comes to the district?
We've got public utilities in the state of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
They have been evident by the recent shortages of natural gas and stuff like that to be certainly lacking in certain areas. One of the areas that they've certainly been lacking in has been building that infrastructure for high-speed broadband internet. I happen to live in an area where I can't get true broadband internet. I can get high-speed internet, but I get, frankly, a higher speed internet off my cell phone connection than I do off my internet connection with the people that I'm connected with now. And part of that is because they just haven't been encouraged and forced to lay the lines that are necessary. During the 20s and the 30s, when we had a rural electrification project, we brought electricity to all the farms of rural Minnesota and all across the United States. There's no reason why we can't do a similar kind of thing with broadband internet and get everybody on board broadband internet. Internet is the future. You guys are streaming live on Facebook. That's the future. The future is people like myself working from home, commuting from home. I worked for a multi-million-dollar furniture company as a salesperson. I never once met one of my customers who were from across the United States in person. All of it was done through email, Facebook, chats on Skype, and telephone calls. Mm-hmm. Building that broadband infrastructure is going to help the rural economy, and it's going to help bring more jobs to the area.
All right, Stu Lourey?
This is an issue of fundamental fairness, right? And it impacts the communities that all of us here hope to represent in a really intimate way, right? If folks aren't linked up, you know, a lot of folks talk about this as an economic development problem, and I think it absolutely is. But it's now beyond that. If you don't have access to quality internet, you can't apply for a job, you can't make a doctor's appointment, you can't do your homework if you're a kid in school. So it just comes down to fundamental fairness. This is 2019. We need to hold these companies accountable, make sure they're building out to the last mile, and making sure that everyone's linked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, this is the #1 issue facing our district and many rural areas of Minnesota. Our economy is based on internet access, and we are not going to attract companies to expand or build here. Kids are going to fall behind in their education. So we need to continue to put more money into the grant program. I've been trying to get it so that townships can apply for the grants on their own without a provider already in place. And I've been working with Senator Tony Lourey to get it so that, because this is infrastructure, we should be able to use bonding money to put this in. And then the biggest mistake that was made is any state and federal money that was put into it, we didn't require that these companies had to allow others to tap into it. We have 3, 4, sometimes 5 fiber optic cables that run down through the same ditch, and they go through a community, and when the community wants to tap in, they're not allowed to. Okay. And so unlike the electrical, where we only put power lines through once, we're doing it multiple times with fiber optic, and that's where we really drop the ball, and we absolutely have to change that going forward.
Another subject, I'm going to ask you to keep your answers a little shorter. Jason, should we have railroad passenger service between the Twin Ports and the Twin Cities?
If we're talking about the NLX line,
Yes.
I do not favor that.
You do not favor that line. It will not be high speed, will it?
It won't be high speed, and that would just end what its purpose was for.
I would favor having Duluth to the Twin Cities connection. We're already building it out to St. Cloud. Eventually it's going to go to Fargo-Moorhead. They're heading for the Rochester area. They're already building it out toward Minnetonka. Why this district has been ignored on this issue? It could be a great way for the casinos to bring people up to them and also promote tourism and things like that to get people up into here and enjoy this beautiful weather that we have up here in the Northland. And there you go.
We need to be making, we have a lot of investments that we need to be making in transportation infrastructure. Whether this is the right one right now, I think we need to look at the ridership studies, right? Follow the data, see when it makes sense and make that investment then.
Stu, Lourey, a lot of people talking about green energy these days. What do you think that Minnesota should be doing to advance that?
Absolutely. So this is hugely important. You know, I'll start, this is important because climate change is real. It's caused by people, and it's going to hurt Minnesota and communities that I hope to represent here in East Central and Northeastern Minnesota. And I think moving towards renewable energies is going to be a big part of combating that. And what's exciting for me about a renewable energy future is that these sources of energy are going to be deployed in our rural communities and small towns, right? You can't do biomass in downtown Minneapolis, and you can't build a solar field there, right? So I think when we look at these proposals, we need to make sure that whatever wealth is created as a result of the deployment of those technologies, that it stays here in our communities.
Okay, we only have about a minute left, so 30 seconds each of you on renewable energy.
You know, we have to move towards renewables. I don't want to see us do a mandate. When we saw the mandates put in place, that was good to begin the process, but the cost was way too high. But we know now that the renewables are there. I've been pushing for doing more into storage. We need the storage in order to have solar and wind be viable. So that's what I'm looking at, and it'll happen in the marketplace. We all want it.
All right, John.
Down in the Twin Cities, they are using solar on top of a lot of the big tall buildings down there in order to augment their electrical usage and stuff like that. We should not only look at all of those options, but we should also look at the possibilities of biomass that the farmers here in Minnesota, and especially this district, could be growing and being turned into methanol and ethanol and other fuels that are going to be better.
All right, well, gentlemen, we're out of time. Representative Jason Rarick, John Sparky Birrenback, and Stu Lourey, thank you. Good luck as you head into the election, and everyone get out and vote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And yes, definitely, everybody get out to vote. We need
February
everybody
5th.
to vote.
Well, it's time now for the business news from the editors at Business North. United States Steel Corporation on Wednesday reported a significant increase in net earnings. The Pittsburgh-based steel and iron ore producer reported full-year net earnings of $1.1 billion, up from $387 million in 2017. Fourth quarter net earnings were $592 million. U.S. Steel owns and operates Mintac Mine and Mountain Iron and Keetac in Keewatin, and is part owner of Hibbing Taconite.
Foxconn Technology Group confirmed today it will construct a Generation 6 liquid crystal display manufacturing facility near Milwaukee. Some media reports this week said the company was switching from a blue-collar facility to a white-collar research and engineering plant. The Taiwanese company made the announcement today after a conversation with President Donald Trump. The company has promised to create 13,000 jobs at its $10 billion Wisconsin campus. Foxconn received controversial state and local incentives for this project.
Rising mortgage interest rates and home prices, along with a shortage of housing throughout the market, have raised concerns of a real estate crash on the horizon. But local real estate professionals and lenders are cautiously optimistic about the coming year. Doug Mann is the president-elect of Lake Superior Association of Realtors. He said the current competitive market is still tipped in the favor of sellers, with a dearth of inventory helping to push up prices. While there has been a drop-off of buyer optimism in recent months, Mann said he believes a more balanced attitude is in the offing this coming summer. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
If you have a comment, call now. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message or send an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org. You can also visit the WDSE website for our program schedule, updates on your favorite shows, and the latest news and events here at the station. And Julie, it was great to get to hear from the candidates in next week's special election.
That's right. I hope all of you who are in the district get out and vote, and it was really nice to hear some unique perspectives.
Absolutely. Thank you. For Julie and the crew at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.